The year is 1242. Snow falls on the frozen Danube. On the far bank, a city holds its breath, and the men inside it know they are already dead. Vienna, the last great gate of Christendom. Beyond its walls lies the soft underbelly of Europe, and every soul within those walls knows that the most terrifying army the world has ever seen is coming for them, the Mongols. They had crossed half the world to reach this place. They had burned Kiev to ash. They had shattered the knights of Poland at Legnica and crushed the armies of Hungary at the Mohi River in a single afternoon of slaughter. No wall had stopped them. No king had survived them. No prayer had turned them back. And now they stood at the threshold of everything. But what if they had taken one more step? What if the riders of the steppe had not turned around and instead had ridden west, through Vienna, through the German lands, all the way to the cold gray waves of the Atlantic? What if the history we know had simply ended here, in the snow in 1242? To understand how close Europe came to extinction, we must go back. We must understand who these men were. They came from the endless grasslands of Mongolia, a people of horses and sky. For centuries they were scattered, warring tribes of no consequence to the great empires of the world. Then came one man, Temujin, a boy who had been a slave, who had watched his father poisoned and his family cast out to starve. That boy became Genghis Khan, and under his banner, the scattered tribes became a single unstoppable force. The Mongol way of war was unlike anything the medieval world had faced. Their warriors lived in the saddle from childhood. Each man rode with several horses, switching mounts to ride for days without rest. They could loose arrows at full gallop with terrifying accuracy. They did not fight for glory or for God. They fought to win by any means, and they were patient, disciplined, and utterly merciless. By the time Genghis died in 1227, his empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. It was already the largest land empire the world had ever known, but his sons and grandsons were not finished. They had been told the empire must expand to the very edge of the earth. And the earth, as far as they were concerned, did not end at Europe. The man who led the Western campaign was Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis. Beside him rode the true mastermind, a general named Subutai. Old, half-blind, monstrously fat by the end of his life, Subutai was perhaps the greatest military commander in human history. He had conquered or raided 32 nations. He had won 65 pitched battles. And in the winter of 1241, he turned his eyes toward the heart of Europe. What followed was not war. It was a demonstration. Subutai split his forces and sent them like the fingers of a closing hand. One army smashed into Poland to keep the northern knights occupied. At the Battle of Legnica in April 1241, a combined force of Polish and German nobles, including the famed Teutonic Knights, was annihilated. The Mongols reportedly cut one ear from each fallen enemy and filled 9 sacks. 2 days later, and hundreds of miles to the south, the main Mongol army destroyed the kingdom of Hungary at the Battle of Mohi. King Bela IV barely escaped with his life. His kingdom was left a smoking ruin. By the end of 1241, the Mongols controlled everything east of the Danube. They had crossed the frozen river. Their scouts had been seen near Vienna itself. Europe had no answer. Think about what stood in their path. The knights of the West were brave, but they were slow, heavy, and disorganized. Their kings hated one another. The Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope were locked in their own bitter feud. There was no unified army. There was no shared command. There was nothing that could have stopped what was coming. So why didn't it come? In December 1241, far away in the Mongol capital, the great Khan Ogedei died. Ogedei was the son of Genghis and the supreme ruler of the entire empire. And by Mongol law, when a great Khan died, the princes of the blood were expected to return to the homeland to elect his successor. Batu Khan was a prince of the blood. So were many of his commanders. And the prize of the empire itself was now in play. So at the very edge of total victory, with Vienna almost within reach and all of Western Europe undefended before them, the Mongols turned their horses around. They rode east, back across the thousands of miles they had come, to a political struggle that mattered more to them than the conquest of the entire Western world. Europe never knew how close it came. It survived not because it was strong, but because a man it had never heard of died in a tent on the other side of the planet. But what if Ogedei had lived one more year? What if Batu had stayed? The road west was open. Vienna would have fallen as every city before it had fallen. The fragmented German principalities would have been swallowed one by one, their feudal armies cut to pieces by horse archers they could neither catch nor outrun. France, Italy, the rich cities of the Rhine, all of it lay exposed. In this alternate history, there is no Holy Roman Empire as we know it. There is no Renaissance flowering in an independent Italy. The universities, the cathedrals, the slow rise of European kingdoms into nation-states, all of it might have been crushed beneath the hooves of the steppe. Imagine an Atlantic coast ruled from a Mongol throne. Imagine the cathedrals of France becoming the administrative centers of a Khanate. Imagine the entire trajectory of Western civilization, the very world we live in, simply erased before it had a chance to begin. The Mongols did not hate Europe. They simply did not see it as special. To them, it was one more land to be folded into the largest empire in history. The men who would later sail to the New World, who would build the modern age, were in 1242 nothing more than the next set of cities waiting to burn, and yet they were spared by an accident of timing, by the death of one man. The Mongol Empire would eventually grow even larger, becoming the largest contiguous land empire that has ever existed. It would reshape Asia, reopen the trade routes we now call the Silk Road, and connect east and west in ways the world had never seen. But it never again came so close to swallowing Europe whole. History turned on a hinge in that frozen winter, not on a battlefield, not on the courage of a king, but on a funeral half a world away. We like to believe that our civilization was inevitable, that the world we know was always meant to be. But stand for a moment on the banks of that frozen Danube, in the snow, in 1242, and look across the river at the riders waiting in the dark. Everything you know almost never existed, and the only thing that saved it was a single death in a distant tent at exactly the right moment in time.